Traceability matrix. Traceability matrix may be defined as a document that is used to establish relationship between two documents. For example, if we have requirement document and we have requirement in the form of use cases, and suppose that there is another document which contains test cases, and if we need to establish relationship between use case document and test case document, I mean use case and test case, and check whether all our use cases are being covered by test cases or not, then it would be very difficult to establish that relationship between the two and check whether all our use cases has been converted into test cases. Traceability matrix comes into picture in such scenarios. It is just an example. It is not that there may be relationship between use case document and test case documents only. I mean use cases and test cases only. There may be relationship between defects and test cases as well. So there may be situation where we require to find out how many defects have been produced from how many test cases and which defect is related to which test case. Then such information can also be obtained by from traceability matrix. So from this information there should be some picture in mind regarding traceability matrix. Most common form of matrix that is used in software industry is requirement traceability matrix. Let us understand why it is so important. We all know that main goal of software testing is to deliver defect-free quality product to client. Now, in order to achieve objective of software testing, it is very important that we create and execute maximum possible test cases. Now, in order to ensure that we have created all the possible test cases required for testing of application, it is important to have one tracker which can track whether we have test cases for all the requirements given by client. Now, the question is how we can map the requirement to test cases so that we can say that corresponding to requirement we have these test cases. This is done using requirement traceability matrix where requirement is in the form of requirement ID and description and also in the form of use cases. So to make it simple, we are taking requirement ID and description which is being mapped with test cases. You can see in the background sample requirement traceability matrix. In this template, we can clearly see that requirement ID and requirement description has been mapped with test cases. We can also map requirement ID and defect ID to map requirements with defect. Not only we can map requirements with defect and test cases, but also can maintain the status of test case in traceability matrix itself. So we can see overall mapping of requirements with test cases and defects along with test case execution status. Now let us see how to create traceability matrix. How to create traceability matrix. Now that we have understood the concept of traceability matrix and we also have seen template of traceability matrix which can be seen in the screenshot. Now it is time to prepare traceability matrix. But before preparing traceability matrix, first thing that we should understand is that from where we will get requirement ID or requirement description. Because it is business analyst who prepares the requirement in the form of business requirement document or technical requirement document or business document. So let us look at the requirement document, how it looks like, although it may vary from organization to organization, but basically content is more or less same and serves the purpose of getting requirement. So basically business requirement document is with business analyst and carries requirement ID and requirement description. Now we come to our traceability matrix document. So let us look at requirement description column where we can clearly see that the requirement is logged into the application. Now that we have got the requirement description, now it is time to create test cases. We know that particular requirement description there may that for we know that for a particular requirement description there may be many test cases. So let us consider a scenario where user is not able to log into the application by entering invalid username and valid password. This is our first test case. As you can see in the screenshot, you can write the test name of test designer as well in the document who has created the test case. Here you can clearly see that requirement has mapped to test cases. So this is only the first test case. We will see other test cases as well. Now we can see second test case which is login with valid username and invalid password. It is quite opposite of first test case. The expected result in both of them is that that user should not be able to log into the application. Expected output is same as the previous test case. You can see second test case in the screenshot as well. Now let us see third test case which is login with valid credentials. Credentials means valid username and password. In this case, expected output is that user should be successfully able to log in. This can also be seen in the screenshot. Now you can clearly see that from one requirement ID and description we are having three test cases. Now we generally have separate document for requirement and separate document for test cases. But we can clearly see in traceability matrix where we can find requirement mapped with test cases, and we can find out which requirement is related to which test cases and which test cases are able to cover which requirement, and whether our test cases are able to cover all the requirements or not. You can see in the screenshot to verify the same. Now that we have been able to see how requirements and can be mapped with test cases in traceability matrix, you can quickly see that test case is you can quickly see which test case is covering which requirement. Now, one very important thing to understand here is that only requirement can be mapped with test cases. Not only requirement can be mapped with test cases, but also defects can be mapped with test cases, which can be clearly seen in the screenshot. Although we captured defect in separate document, but here we can clearly see that all the information is available at one place, and we can say that particular requirement is being covered by particular test cases and which particular defect is related to which particular test cases, and which all makes things easier to track and analyze. Not only this, we can also see test execution status as well as requirement coverage status as given in the screenshot. Now let us see some of the advantages of traceability matrix. First and most important advantage of traceability matrix is that it ensures 100% coverage of the requirement. It quickly highlights the gap between requirement and test cases. It can be used to store defect status of test cases along with requirement mapping all at the same place. Overall, we can say that it is very useful document that stores information right from requirement phase of software testing life cycle to defect closure phase, and we can map important data from different testing documents into one document, which makes it very easy to look at all the interrelated data from different documents into one document. Thank you.